the Galactic Assembly Station. Omega-7 stretched across the void like a mechanical leviathan, its crystalline spires gleaming against the backdrop of distant nebulae. Within its vast corridors, representatives from hundreds of civilizations had gathered for the most important diplomatic summit in galactic history. The air hummed with the cacophony of alien languages, translated in real time by sophisticated neural networks that bridged the communication gap between species separated by millions of light years of evolution. Phoenix Blackwood stood at the periphery of the Grand Assembly Hall, her human form dwarfed by the towering delegates around her. At 26, she was the youngest member of Earth's diplomatic contingent, assigned as a junior assistant to Ambassador Rodriguez. To the assembled aliens, she was barely worth a glance. Another representative of that quaint little species that had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel the humans who were still struggling to terraform their own moon, while others moved entire star systems. The Zephyrian delegation, with their iridescent blue scales and graceful serpentine movements, whispered among themselves in their melodic tongue. The translation implants caught fragments. Primitive species. Barely evolved past their tribal phase. Wonder why they were even invited. Phoenix adjusted her diplomatic badge, a simple silver pin that seemed pathetic compared to the elaborate, crystalline rank indicators worn by the other species. She had studied for years to reach this position, mastering 17 alien languages, memorizing the cultural protocols of dozens of civilizations, and writing her doctoral thesis on interspecies behavioral psychology. Yet here, surrounded by beings who could manipulate matter at the molecular level or communicate through quantum entanglement, her achievements felt insignificant. The Kronar representative, a massive creature with chitinous armor that gleamed like polished obsidian, turned one of its 4 eyes toward her. "Human." It rumbled its voice like grinding boulders. "Your species designation in our databases still reads developing civilization. Perhaps you should observe, rather than participate, in matters of galactic importance." Heat rose in Phoenix's cheeks, but she maintained her composure. "Thank you for the suggestions, Ambassador Thektar. I'm here to learn and contribute where I can." A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the nearby delegates. The Ethereal Collective's representative, a being of pure energy contained within a translucent humanoid shell, flickered in a pattern that Phoenix's cultural studies had taught her was equivalent to polite dismissal. Dr. Ewan, the head of xenobiology from the Andromedan Research Consortium, floated by in his anti-grav chair, his elongated skull pulsing with bioluminescent thought patterns. "Ms. Blackwood," he said, his voice a harmonious blend of tones, "your presence here is noted. However, perhaps you would be more comfortable in the junior delegates' quarters. The matters we discussed today involve ecological preservation protocols that may be beyond your species' current understanding. I appreciate your concern, Doctor, but I'm precisely where I need to be." Phoenix's voice carried a quiet strength that made several nearby delegates pause their conversations. Earth may be new to galactic politics, but we've been dealing with apex predators and ecosystem management for millennia. The comment drew a few amused clicks and whistles from the assembled crowd. The notion that humans, soft bipedal mammals with no natural weapons, no psychic abilities, no technological superiority could manage apex predators was apparently hilarious to beings who had been terraforming worlds since before Earth's continents had taken their current form. Ambassador Rodriguez shot Phoenix a warning look, but she stood her ground. She had not spent 6 years preparing for this moment to be relegated to the sidelines because of her species' reputation. The central holographic display materialized above the assembly, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, with pulsing red zones scattered across multiple star systems. Admiral Vex of the Stellar Union Defense Corps, a being that resembled a cross between a mantis and a coral reef, manipulated the display with precise movements of his crystalline appendages. "Fellow representatives," Admiral Vex's voice carried through the hall via both acoustic and psychic channels. The situation grows more dire each standard cycle. The Ravagers, what you call apex predators, continue their expansion across the Outer Rim territories. 17 colonies have been completely destroyed in the past solar month alone. The display zoomed in on one of the red zones, showing the remnants of what had once been a thriving mining world. The planet's surface was scarred with massive gouges, as if something unimaginably large had literally chewed through the mountains. These creatures, continued Admiral Vex, defy all conventional understanding. They appear to be organic, yet they survive in the vacuum of space. They show signs of intelligence, yet they respond to no form of communication we have attempted. They resist our most advanced weapons, adapt to our strategies, and seem to feed on both matter and energy. Phoenix studied the holographic images intently, noting details that others seemed to overlook. The pattern of destruction wasn't random. There was a logic to it, a purpose that the others were missing. Dr. Zara Oxy, the chief xenobiologist of the hegemony, stood gracefully, her translucent form rippling like water. Our analysis indicates these beings are not native to any known ecosystem. They appear suddenly without warning, and their physiology suggests they should not be able to exist in normal space-time. Then how do we stop them? Demanded General Krex of the warrior caste of Tartarus, his red-scaled form bristling with biological weaponry. My fleets have engaged them 7 times. Each encounter results in massive casualties, and the creatures seem to learn from our tactics. Murmurs of fear and frustration rippled through the assembly. These were civilizations that had conquered galaxies, beings who treated physics as suggestions, rather than laws, species that could manipulate time and space at will. Yet they spoke of the Ravagers with a terror that Phoenix found both fascinating and telling. "If I may?" Phoenix said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. The assembly fell silent, hundreds of alien eye sensors and attention-focusing organs turning toward her. The weight of their collective gaze would have crushed most beings, but Phoenix had grown up in a world where she was constantly underestimated. She was used to being the smallest voice in the room. "You say these creatures respond to no form of communication?" She continued, stepping forward into the holographic display. "Has anyone attempted to communicate with them using instinctual behavioral cues rather than language?" A series of sounds, clicks, hums, harmonic overtones, and one particularly unpleasant squelching noise indicated various forms of alien amusement or dismissal. "Child," said the overmind of the collective consciousness. Its words appearing directly in Phoenix's mind with uncomfortable intimacy. "We have attempted every known form of communication across 17 different dimensional phases. These beings are beyond reasoning. But have you tried behaving like prey?" Phoenix asked, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. The silence that followed was different, not dismissive, but thoughtful, even contemptuous. "Elaborate," Admiral Vex said curtly. Phoenix manipulated the holographic controls, having memorized their operation during the preliminary sessions. The display shifted to show behavioral patterns and migration routes. "Every species here has evolved beyond the predator-prey dynamic that shaped your early development. You approach these creatures as equals, as fellow sentients to be negotiated with, but look at their behavior patterns." The hologram highlighted the creatures' movements across star systems. They're not random. They're hunt patterns, pack behavior. These Ravagers aren't just apex predators, they're apex pack hunters. They have social structures, hierarchies, territories. Dr. Ewan's bioluminescent patterns shifted to indicate intense interest despite himself. Continue. "On Earth, we've spent thousands of years learning to coexist with apex predators, not through technology or superior firepower, but through understanding. We learned to read their behavior to communicate through action and posture rather than language. We learned to establish dominance without aggression to become part of their pack structure." "Ridiculous," scoffed the Kronar ambassador. "You suggest we should submit to these monsters?" "I suggest we should understand them," Phoenix replied firmly. "Every apex predator follows certain universal principles. They respect strength, but not the kind you're thinking of. They respect confidence, consistency, and the ability to read and respond to their social cues. She manipulated the display again, showing Earth's relationship with its own apex predators, the great white sharks that had learned to work with human researchers, the wolves that had been reintegrated into Yellowstone, the big cats that served as partners in conservation efforts. "This is preposterous," declared the ethereal collective's representative. "You're comparing cosmic horrors to your planet's wildlife." "All predators follow certain basic principles," Phoenix insisted. "The scale doesn't matter. The essence remains the same." Before anyone could respond, the station's alarm system erupted in a cacophony of sounds and lights, designed to alert every species simultaneously. Admiral Vex's form went rigid as he received real-time data through his neural implants. "Impossible," he whispered, then louder. "We're reading massive quantum disturbances at the station's perimeter, multiple contacts approaching at relativistic speeds." The main display shifted to show the station's external sensors. In the distance, space itself seemed to ripple and tear. Through the tears emerged shapes that defied easy description, organic yet geometric, massive yet graceful alien, in a way that made the assembled delegates look like close relatives. The Ravagers had come to them. "All stations to maximum alert," Admiral Vex commanded. "Deploy defense grids. Signal all ships too." His words were cut off as the station shuddered its massive structure, groaning under forces that should have been impossible. The artificial gravity fluctuated, and several delegates were thrown to the ground. Emergency containment fields activated around the more volatile species, representatives. Through the panoramic windows of the assembly hall, they could see the Ravagers up close for the first time. They were enormous, each one easily the size of a city district, with forms that seemed to shift between solid matter and something else entirely. Parts of their bodies phased in and out of visible space, while others maintained a disturbing solidity that hurt to look at directly. But it was their eyes that truly unsettled the assembly. Hundreds of them arrayed across each creature's form, all focused with unmistakable intelligence on the station. This wasn't a mindless attack. This was a calculated approach. "Weapons are ineffective," reported the station's tactical officer, his voice transmitted through the communication system. "The creatures are absorbing our energy discharges. They're actually growing larger." Panic began to spread through the assembly. Delegates activated personal shields, called for evacuations, demanded immediate transport off the station. Some of the more advanced species began attempting to phase shift into higher dimensions, only to find their way blocked by the Ravagers' presence. "They're not attacking," Phoenix said suddenly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Not attacking." General Krex's red scales flared with agitation. "They're surrounding us." "No, look at their formation. Look at their behavior." Phoenix stepped closer to the window, ignoring the protests from the security detail. "This isn't an attack formation. They're investigating, curious." As if summoned by her words, one of the smaller Ravagers, though still massive by any reasonable standard, approached the station. Its dozens of eyes focused on the assembly hall, and for a moment, Phoenix could swear it was looking directly at her. "Everyone stay calm," she said, her voice carrying with surprising authority. "Sudden movements will trigger a chase response." "You cannot be serious." The Overmind's thoughts pressed into her skull. "You think your primitive understanding of animal behavior applies to these cosmic horrors?" Phoenix ignored the mental intrusion, focusing entirely on the creature outside the window. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her hands to her sides, palms forward, a universal gesture of non-aggression. The creature's eyes tracked her movement. Then she did something that made every delegate in the hall take a step back in horror. She walked straight toward the docking bay. "Stop her," Admiral Vex commanded, but Phoenix was already moving her diplomatic override codes, getting her through. Security checkpoints that would have stopped anyone else. The docking bay was a cathedral of metal and crystal, designed to accommodate vessels from hundreds of different species. Now it faced the open maw of space, beyond which the Ravagers waited. Phoenix stood at the edge of the atmospheric containment field, the only thing between her and the vacuum. The nearest Ravager moved closer, its form shifting and pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that might have been communication attempts. Up close, Phoenix could see that its surface wasn't simply organic, it was covered in structures that looked almost like sensory organs, each one tracking her movements with laser focus. Behind her, she could hear the delegates arguing in a dozen languages, their translation implants struggling to keep up with the rapid, panicked communication. Admiral Vex was shouting orders to security teams that didn't know whether to protect Phoenix or restrain her. But Phoenix tuned it all out. She had spent her entire career studying predator behavior, and everything she saw confirmed her hypothesis. The Ravagers weren't monsters, they were pack hunters, operating on a scale larger than anyone had imagined. Slowly, Phoenix lowered herself into a crouch, making herself smaller, less threatening. It was a position of submission, but also of readiness. She kept her eyes on the creature, not challenging its gaze, but acknowledging its dominance. The Ravager's bioluminescent patterns shifted, becoming more complex, more rhythmic. Other creatures began to gather their massive forms, creating a semicircle around the station. Phoenix realized that the first creature was the Scout, the advance guard. Now the pack was assembling. "What are you doing, human?" The voice belonged to Dr. Ewan, who had followed her to the docking bay despite the danger. "Establishing communication," Phoenix replied, never taking her eyes off the lead Ravager. "They're trying to determine if we're a threat prey or potential pack members." She stood slowly, keeping her movements fluid and controlled. Then, in a gesture that would be recorded in xenobiological texts for millennia, she mimicked the creature's bioluminescent pattern using her suit's emergency lighting system. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every Ravager in the vicinity pulsed in unison, their lights creating a symphony of color that painted the vacuum around the station. The lead creature moved even closer, its massive form now filling most of the docking bay entrance. Phoenix could feel the terror of the delegates behind her, their various fight-or-flight responses flooding the air with pheromones and energy signatures that would have triggered any normal predator. But the Ravagers seemed focused entirely on her. The lead creature extended what might have been an appendage, a writhing mass of tentacles and sensory organs that stopped just short of the containment field. Phoenix understood. Maintaining eye contact with the creature's primary cluster of eyes, she slowly reached out and touched the containment field directly opposite the appendage. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Through the energy field, she could feel the creature's mind vast, ancient, curious. It wasn't like the rigid thought patterns of the advanced AI species, nor the chaotic emotions of biological beings. This was something else entirely, a form of consciousness that operated on principles she was only beginning to understand. Images flooded her mind, vast spaces between galaxies where the Ravagers originated, the slow, patient hunt across cosmic distances, the pack structure that defined their society. They weren't destroyers, they were gardeners, pruning civilizations that had grown too aggressive, too expansionist, too dangerous to the cosmic ecosystem. And they had been watching humanity for a very long time. Phoenix Ambassador Rodriguez's voice crackled through her comm system. "What's happening? Your life signs are odd." Phoenix turned slowly, never breaking the connection with the lead Ravager. When she spoke, her voice carried a strange harmony, as if something else was speaking through her. "They want to communicate with the pack leaders. They've been trying to establish contact for centuries, but no species would listen. You all respond to them as threats rather than attempting to understand." "Impossible." Admiral Vex's voice boomed through this bay's speakers. "These creatures have destroyed entire worlds." The lead Ravager's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Phoenix recognized as amusement. Through their connection, she could see the truth of those destroyed worlds, aggressive military installations, strip mining operations that were destabilizing entire star systems, civilizations that had turned their weapons on other species. "Not destroyed," Phoenix corrected, her voice growing stronger. Regulated. You're dealing with a species that views the galaxy as a single ecosystem. Civilizations that become too aggressive, too destructive, are pruned to maintain cosmic balance. The implications hit the assembly like a shockwave. These weren't random monsters, they were cosmic gardeners, and every sentient species in the galaxy was being evaluated by their standards. Then why don't they just communicate normally? Demanded Dr. Zara Oxeith. Phoenix smiled, and for a moment, the assembled delegates saw her not as a primitive human, but as something far more complex. Because most species communicate through technology, the Ravagers communicate through behavior, through action, through demonstrated understanding of cosmic principles. They're looking for species mature enough to be partners rather than subjects. She turned back to the lead Ravager, and this time when she matched its bioluminescent pattern, she added variations of her own questions, responses, a conversation conducted in light and energy. The creature responded in kind, and soon they were engaged in a complex dialogue that no universal translator could have parsed. Behind her, the assembly watched in stunned silence as Phoenix Blackwood, the insignificant human assistant they had dismissed, conducted the first successful communication with the Ravagers in recorded galactic history. The conversation continued for hours. Phoenix learned that the Ravagers were not from this galaxy, but from the spaces between galaxies, that they had been observing the development of consciousness across cosmic time, that they were seeking a species capable of joining them in maintaining the balance of life across the universe. Most species, when they reached a certain level of development, became either too aggressive or too insular. They either sought to dominate everything around them or withdrew into pocket dimensions and virtual realities. The Ravagers had been searching for a species that could reach technological maturity while maintaining the behavioral flexibility of their predator-prey origins. Humans, it turned out, were unique in their ability to form pack bonds with other species to maintain social structures that included vastly different forms of consciousness to treat other sentients as equals while still respecting the natural hierarchies that governed all life. When Phoenix finally stepped back from the containment field, she was changed. The delegates could see it in her eyes, in the way she moved, in the subtle harmonics that now colored her voice. "The Ravagers have made their decision," she announced to the assembly. "Earth is to be admitted as a junior member of the Cosmic Gardeners. They want to work with us to establish better communication protocols with other species." "And the other species?" asked the Overmind, its mental voice unusually subdued. Phoenix looked around the assembly, seeing each delegate with new eyes. "That depends on their willingness to evolve. The Ravagers aren't asking you to submit, they're asking you to grow. To remember that intelligence without wisdom, technology without restraint, leads to the kind of cosmic cancer that they have had to prune from other galaxies." The lead Ravager began to withdraw from the docking bay, but not before extending its appendage one final time toward Phoenix. This time she didn't hesitate to reach through the containment field and make direct contact. The sensation was like being plugged directly into the universe itself. Knowledge flowed between them, not just information, but understanding. Phoenix saw the true scope of the Ravagers' mission, the civilizations they had saved by forcing them to confront their own destructive tendencies, the species that had achieved true cosmic citizenship by learning to work within the universal ecosystem rather than against it. When the connection ended, Phoenix found herself surrounded by a sea of alien faces, all looking at her with expressions that ranged from fear to awe to something approaching worship. "How?" asked Dr. Yin, his bioluminescent patterns cycling through colors that indicated deep confusion mixed with admiration. "How did you succeed where our greatest minds failed?" Phoenix smiled, feeling the first Ravager's presence receding as the pack moved on to continue their eternal vigil. "Because I didn't try to change them. I tried to understand them. And sometimes the most primitive approach is actually the most sophisticated." Admiral Vex approached carefully, his crystalline form reflecting the lights of the retreating Ravagers. "Ms. Blackwood Phoenix, what happens now?" "Now," Phoenix said, looking out at the vast expanse of space where the Ravagers had disappeared, We learn. Earth becomes humanity's school for galactic citizenship. The Ravagers will send Teachers Pack members who will help us develop the protocols for communication with species that exist outside traditional technological frameworks. She turned to face the assembly, and when she spoke, her voice carried an authority that had nothing to do with her official position and everything to do with what she had just experienced. The galaxy is about to change. Species will have to choose whether they want to be part of a larger ecosystem or continue pretending that they exist in isolation. The Ravagers aren't tyrants, they're gardeners. And gardens require cooperation, balance, and the wisdom to know when something has grown too large for the available space. In the days that followed, Phoenix became the de facto liaison between humanity and the cosmic gardeners. The Ravagers kept their word, sending smaller members of their pack to Earth to establish a communication center that could translate between behavior-based and technology-based forms of consciousness. Phoenix worked tirelessly to develop new protocols for interspecies communication, drawing on both human understanding of predator-prey dynamics and the Ravagers' cosmic perspective on consciousness and civilization. She established the Institute for Cosmic Behavioral Sciences, which became the training ground for a new generation of diplomats who could bridge the gap between traditional galactic politics and the Ravagers' ecosystem approach. The other species of the galaxy watched humanity's rapid integration with the cosmic gardeners with a mixture of fear and envy. Some, like the Andromedan Research Consortium, began sending their own behavioral specialists to study with Phoenix. Others, particularly the more militaristic civilizations, retreated further into their own territories, unsure how to adapt to a universe where the ultimate arbiters of power were beings that valued ecological balance over technological supremacy. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed itself. The revelation that consciousness was being actively guided and maintained on a cosmic scale by beings older than most known civilizations forced a fundamental reevaluation of what it meant to be sentient in an infinite universe. Phoenix often stood in the observation deck of the new Earth Ravager communication facility, watching the ships of various species come and go. Some came to learn, others to negotiate, and a few to challenge the new order. But all of them, she noted with some satisfaction, approached with the kind of careful respect typically reserved for apex predators, which she reflected was exactly as it should be. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been promoted to head the new Bureau of Cosmic Relations, joined her at the observation window one evening. "Any regrets?" he asked, about how it all turned out. Phoenix considered the question as she watched a Ravager teacher glide silently past the station, its bioluminescent patterns casting beautiful shadows across the starfield. "No," she said finally. "For the first time since we've known we weren't alone in the universe, humanity has found its place. Not as conquerors, not as subjects, but as partners in something larger than any single species could imagine. And the other species, some of them still see you as a threat, you know. They call you the Predator Whisperer, and they're not sure if that's a compliment or a warning." Phoenix smiled, remembering the fear and dismissal she had encountered at that first galactic assembly. Let them wonder. Sometimes the most important thing you can be is underestimated right up until the moment you prove them wrong. Outside the window, the stars continued their ancient dance, and somewhere among them, the Ravagers maintained their patient vigil. And Phoenix Blackwood, the girl who had once been just another junior human diplomat, stood as humanity's bridge to a larger universe, proving that sometimes the smallest voice in the room carried the most important message. The galaxy had thought she was just a girl from a primitive species. They had been wrong about the primitive part, and even more wrong about the power of someone who understood that true strength didn't come from technology or evolution or psychic abilities. It came from the ability to look at the apex predators of the universe and see not monsters, but potential family. And in a universe full of apex predators, that made all the difference.